When we think of windmills, we automatically think of one thing: unspeakable violence. And in chess, this is no different. The windmill tactic is one of, if not the most potent and brutal attacks that you could employ in chess, and is one of the most violent things you can do to your opponent without going to prison. We'll look at 3 examples of a windmill. It's generally employed with a bishop and a rook, but can be used with other pieces. Let's have a look at a few examples. So our first example here, we are playing as black and we are just about to unleash the windmill. So the windmill, if you're unfamiliar with it, generally looks something like this, where you've got the king in the corner or else here on g7, g2, b7, b2, wherever it might be. And you've got a bishop backing up a rook, such that anywhere you move that rook is going to be a discovered attack on this king. And anywhere that king moves, the rook can come back and put him in check. So you can windmill or cycle through your discover check attack, discover check attack, discover check attack, until your opponent starts crying and leaves the hall. So how we will employ this in this case is pretty much any move with the rook here is going to be winning, as long as you take some of this material. But we'll start off by taking this knight on g3. Again, king is in check, can't move here, has to move here, and again just straight back into out of the oven into the frying pan, as they say. So we put him back into check, and again, his only move is back into that danger zone again. That is the windmill effect. It just keeps on coming around. And we'll play this one out, but the rook is just going to take the mick here. Going to take a pawn there for no reason. Did not have to do that, but there's no reason not to. You can just keep on cycling around. So white started this exercise 12 points of material up. That's not going to be how the story finishes. We just keep on cycling around, just taking pieces as we may, and we finally decide to let our opponent off the hook or out of this windmill with this final move, because again, you might even think, oh, you've hung your rook here. No, king's in check. It has to respond to the check every single time. Maybe they want to block with the bishop, but it's delaying the inevitable. And we finally break the windmill, or end the windmill cycle of unbelievable violence and destruction by taking the queen. And now we'll see that black is now 6 points of material up. And if white is not completely demoralized, they will be soon, because this game is over. We've got three juicers here, 3 passed pawns, and we're up material in the piece sense as well. So that's a really good example of what a windmill can be. Let's look at our next example. So we mentioned at the top of the video that a windmill doesn't have to just be a bishop and a rook. It often is, but in this case you'll see that there's also a knight in the mix. So looking at this example, white is actually 5 points of material up and looking in pretty commanding position, were it not for the war crime that we're about to commit against them. So our knight is currently blocking this check from our own bishop, so the discovery is going to happen there. With this rook here blocking up the e-file, the king can only move here to g1, where this knight will be able to bounce back, put him in check again. He'll have to move back to f1, and then again, windmill cycle of violence. Here we go. So knight starts with a rook, very leisurely, does it with his own pace. King is in check, has to move into that g1 square, where he is vulnerable to the knight to pop back again. The knight takes its sweet, sweet time, takes a pawn there on d4, because why not? There is literally no downside to doing it. Jumps back in, pops in another discovered check, and ultimately we end the windmill, as we did in the previous example, by taking the queen, breaking the windmill cycle, but from a position of 5 points of material down to 7 points of material up. And again, commanding mentality-wise, like the white players they're just going to leave. They're just not going to play anymore. They have been completely abused here across the board. So, moving on to our final example, which is from a Rio Grande Master game. So our final game comes to you from 1925, and a game between 2 very famous players, Carlos Torre, a young Mexican player at the time, taking on former world champion and very famous player Emmanuel Lasker, who you might know from other very important games. Now this just goes to show you how much better at chess grandmasters are than your average bear. Torre here has the white pieces, but difficult enough position, a lot of attacks coming through, both players in pretty decent shape. But Torre plays this stunning attack which leads into a windmill, just gives up his queen, just moves the bishop here into f6, setting up the windmill, as we'll be very attuned to in this video, but just gives up his queen, just says, yeah, whatever, have it, man. Don't worry, because I have calculated this act of brutality. So he kicks off the windmill, again taking the pawn there on g7, king moves into his windmillable square, and the rook gets to work, gobbles up a pawn, why not? Puts him back into check. gobbles up a bishop, why not, puts him back into check, and then again, as we saw, ending the windmill by taking the queen. They don't always have to end that way, just these three happen to do so, and queens are pretty valuable, so, you know, worth giving up this fabulous attack for their best piece. And even in this case, and this will show you again what grandmasters are like, actually gives back the bishop in the end. Says, you know what, have it, because now white is 3 pawns up after, out of absolutely nothing, giving away his queen for 3 pawns ultimately in the end. And in grandmaster terms, 3 pawns with this little material left on the board is a whole world of hurt for Manuel Lasker. So an absolutely vicious windmill attack at the highest level of chess, and this had a New York Times article about it, this game, because it was quite famous at the time. So that is windmills. They are very, very fun to employ. Rare enough, but keep an eye out if you've got that rook pinning down against the king, a castled king normally, and a bishop also filing down on that long diagonal. Chances are you might have a windmill tactic, and if you can employ that in a blitz game or rapid game, again, you will unleash absolute devastation on your opponent. That's all from me, folks. One quick ask for yourselves. At time of speaking, I have 436 subscribers. So a very magical number, 64 subscribers away from my goal this year, which was 500. So if you would like to be one of those magical 64, you can imagine you're one of the squares on a chessboard subscribing, or whatever, if you want to. But either way, I hope you had a good time, and take it easy. Thanks.